Hello everyone and welcome to the EVN Disrupt podcast. My name is Nishat Saturyan. I'm the editor of the creative tech section here at EVN Report. Our guest this week was Gevorg Karapetyan, the co-founder and CTO of Zero, a company that is building generative AI solutions for augmenting knowledge workers. We also spoke about the company's platform, Hercules, which delivers generative AI solutions for enterprise customers and the productivity benefits it brings. We also spoke about building defensible businesses in the era of generative AI and the future of co-pilots for knowledge workers. Thank you for listening. Gevorg, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for the invitation. Understand, it's a pleasure to be here.
I want to start with a little bit of your background. Tell me how you got into tech and entrepreneurship.
Absolutely. So my background is pretty traditional for the tech entrepreneurs here in Armenia. So it's like at first after the school, I joined a polytechnic, like high school. It was with like deep direction towards the math and physics. Then I graduated that. I started to continue my study in applied mathematics again in Polytechnic. Then master's, and I did my PhD in computer science. And after that, I already co-founded the Zero. So before that, like in the process, I was working in tech companies. So during my master's years, I was working in a company called Imagenomic. It's a US-based company, and we were providing software for enhancing videos and images for professional photographers. So basically like edge computing, it was always the thing that I was working on. And when I entered the PhD program, there was a choice whether to combine both, working in industry and do research, or going towards like harder path and choose research only.
It's pure academia.
Yeah, pure academic. And like I always have an attitude, when you are doing something, you need to do it like fully, right? And I just left my very high paid job in American company and went to do my PhD. And I started to work in Institute for Informatics and Automation Problems of National Academy of Science. So my salary was like less than $100 per month. Yeah. But everything is in our hands. And I applied for grants. I was winning every year the grant for PhD students. So I equipped all the lab with PCs, monitors, budget for renovations, equipment, and so on. I started to collaborate with companies here, for example, Pixart, etc. And by end of the day, my salary become like pretty normal and very high for traditional scientific salaries. But that's the thing, like everything is in your hands.
Right.
And one day, I was working in my lab, and a person entered and just asked where my professor is, and it was So Sagayan, who is distinguished professor in San Antonio University, and we started to work together. We started to publish together, like conferences, papers, go to San Francisco and back, and so on. That teach me a lot about applied science, and basically a lot lessons that I learned during that period of time. I am using every day during my life as a CTO.
I really want to talk about that, but before I ask about that, what was your PhD in? What were your focus on?
It was in computer vision.
Right.
So it was in mHealth. So we're applying computationally heavy algorithms on mobile devices. So application was in mHealth. So we were creating the devices, the adapters for example, endoscopy. So let's assume in third world countries, right, or during the military actions, or in places where you cannot bring this big, expensive equipment, still people need to get the medical treatment, right? And we were creating adapter over the iPad, and we do all the image and real-time image and video processing on the small devices. And moreover, then we created the algorithm which was enhancing the image quality that was empowering cancer screening algorithms, because there was so much noise in the endoscopic images that this algorithm had very hard time in segmenting tumors and so on. Our algorithm became a very good one. We did a lot of tests that it was improving the cancer screening algorithm.
Was that ever commercialized or?
It wasn't commercialized. We created the prototypes. I was working with some medical institutions, both here in the US, but it never became like a commercial product. So actually, when I was about to finish my PhD, I want to go back to industry. And I was like choosing where to go, right, to continue the things that I was doing or something new. And then I met my co-founder, and we discussed about the problem of the productivity for knowledge workers. And, like that mission was so big, like when you are returning the most expensive thing to the people, which is their time.
Right.
And I said, you can like spend your entire life working on that, dedicating to that problem. And we started the Zero with that mission and continue till now, and will continue.
And what year was this? What year was the company founded?
2014.
2014. Okay. So a lot has happened since then in terms of the world of like AI for knowledge workers.
Absolutely.
Let's dive into that. But before we do, I'm curious, you did your PhD, you had a really reputable advisor, Dr. Karapetyan, was like a world-renowned researcher in computer vision. Presumably you could have continued in academia. Like what makes someone who does a PhD decide to dive into business and industry instead of following through with science?
Actually, when you are doing your PhD, and I'm speaking about the applied sciences, right?
Sure.
Fundamental, I think, is slightly different. That is coping a lot of important things which are needed for the entrepreneur, right? Because you need to find the topic which is like important for this time, right? Because you need to attract funding.
Right.
So there are similar things. Right now, as a startup, we're attracting funding because they're solving a problem which matters. The same is in your PhD, right? You need to make sure that it's competitive, right? Because you want to be published in peer-reviewed top paper, like, journals. You want to be called as conferences as a speaker and so on. So that make you a skill of creating like cutting edge research which has applied. But I think the most important lesson that I learned, it was like system engineering. Like you can create like sophisticated system from many components, and you can do it fast, and you need to make sure that all the components are work together, right? And that's a mindset. To decompose a problem to the parts, assemble with like different components and make it work.
Right.
And basically this is absolutely like important thing for the like tech entrepreneurs, like as a CTOs,
Right.
because every time you have a complicated problem, you need to assemble that, and you are very lean in your resources. So you need to reuse a lot of stuff, and you need to have like, that feeling like, to be able to assemble that systems, and then already work like it's from 0 to 1, right? And then you need to work from 1 to 10 to make it scalable, repeatable, and so on.
Yeah. My favorite answer to this question, which I've given a lot on the podcast, was Gevorg Karapetyan from AIM. He said, like, oftentimes, like, if an engineer or a scientist thinks that by switching to like doing a startup or doing entrepreneurship, they'd be moving away from building things. It's sometimes like a barrier for them to cross. But he put it in the way that really what you end up just doing is you end up building other things, like systems for like how the company runs, like managing people, and like how the company just works in a more efficient way. And I thought if someone is at the end of the day interested in building and systems, it's still a lot of the skills are,
absolutely. But yeah, I can add there from that angle. So I think that this answer has a two parts, right? First, what it is needed to become better like engineer, right? And the second, when you are entering the world of like, a business, you need to be focused on the ROI.
Right.
And that's very important thing, right? You can always start on the impact, because you need to solve, like, bring the technology to solving the problem, not developing a technology and finding a problem, right?
Right. Yeah, it's a classic trap that a lot of entrepreneurs fall into. Yeah. So you already explained a little bit about the opportunity you guys saw, which was boosting the productivity of knowledge workers. Knowledge workers obviously are some of the most highest paid people in industries, and maximizing the efficiency of their time is something that businesses are really, really interested in. Tell us at the very beginning what the product looked like. What was the initial opportunity that you guys saw and tried to build for?
So the first thing that all of us were facing as like knowledge workers as well was like huge amount of information, right? And you need to identify the signal from huge amount of noise. And the first application was doing like the prioritization of the information based on like many parameters, and to make sure that you can focus on the things which will matter, right? And as an application was on email, right? So we're doing prioritization of your email. And back to like 9 years ago, right? We were developing the algorithm for summarization of the text, right? It's the thing that now ChatGPT can do pretty easily. In that time, it was very hard. And moreover, when we were speaking about enterprises, we couldn't move that data out of their like ecosystem, and we do it all on like devices or on-prem. So it was pretty hard, pretty challenging. A lot of people were saying, guys, you are crazy that you took that path. Just take some like, AWS, we used like all these like Python libraries which are available, but we're saying no, for us privacy and security is the number one priority. It's number one feature that we have, and we will continue that part, and that's why we start to be attractive for regulated industries like and conservative industries such as legal, for example, right? Because they don't own their data. Their data is their customers' data, clients' data, and they have a lot of legal obligations how to like govern that data. And
what does legal data look like? Is like briefings, like
it's like it's law firm, right? And it has like the customers such as like banks, like and the large enterprises and so on. The data is their documents, their emails,
just large amounts of
contracts.
text.
It's a huge amount of like textual data. There are a lot of manual work that's been done to process and analyze that data in terms of like compliance, for example, right? You need to make sure that all the data which is related to particular client and matter is stored in particular locations, so you can apply governance, like information governance policies, for example, retention policies for 3-4 years that data should be like removed, or vice versa. There are things that you can keep it for like 100 years, right? Will, for example, right? And you make sure after 70 years you need to come and find where that information
better be
is,
there,
right? And usually like the partners and like associates and like just attorneys are coming and go, right? But the data still need to remain and be classified. And that's the first problem that we were attacking, was for compliance. So we're very good in the classification of the data, and then we just were already putting to the right like location. After that, because of our classification algorithms are the best in the industry, we said like, we can classify not only documents and emails, but we can also classify the activities. And because of that, we created one more product which was classifying all the activities and generating the like invoices for the customers, right? For their clients. And there's like a tool which calls timekeeping system. So the attorney is working. We are analyzing all the activities, we're classifying, we're generating narratives. Again, we're generating narratives many years ago before for all this generative AI stuff, and putting in their time entry systems. Now we are adding the next product as well, which is analyzing all their pre-bills. It's like, it's a final draft before sending to the customer. And we are comparing that across the billing guidelines, because every customer have a billing guideline, which like indicates for what they are willing to pay and for what not. For example, they are paying for discovery, but they are not paying if a partner helps associate to do some work, right? And nobody has the time to pass to analyze the pre-bills and the billing guidelines, and because of that they have like 20% of rejection rate. This is if we are speaking about the largest law firms in the world, which has like billions of dollars of revenue. You can do the math and see the amount of the problem.
So your system would track when some lawyer at a firm is doing what type of work, and then automatically tally up the hours that needs to be billed for each task.
Yeah, and also suggest what is what they can write and what is not, so they can be like much more effective in the end of like ROI, right? Because everything is about ROI.
Interesting. So where does your system sit? Is it like it's on the lawyer's computer, I guess, or
for lawyers it's their computer, their mobile device, and also their on-prem servers.
Fascinating.
Yeah, now the legal industry are going to cloud, and thanks for Microsoft. They did like huge job, like, in convincing guys like law firms to moving to cloud. And we are already have some like, customers who have like, their cloud solutions. So this is for legal, right? But then, because again, legal market was really good for us because there's a huge amount of label data. So you have the most expensive data labelers, right? The partners of the law firms, etc., were did all the job of labeling the data, and we were training our algorithms. And then we understand that we are very good in understanding of unstructured data and classifying of unstructured data, doing entity extraction on unstructured data. And then in 2017, Google did that paper was published about like attention was and after that there was like the BERT model. And
for those who don't know, BERT was the first like really big language model that was released.
It was the first like foundational models that had adopted like a huge adoption in the industry. And we found that super promising technology. We adopted that, and we changed our we were always data centric. So for us, small amount of data is better than a huge amount of data which has a lot
the quality of the data.
Quality data is super important. And we said let's go with path of few shot learning, that you can provide just few examples and give end-to-end solution to the customers. And then when they are using your software, they are providing feedback. And then by your feedback, you're fine-tuning the model already inside their security perimeter.
Right.
And that creates the new generation of our products, which opened the door for us for largest enterprises in the world, such as Fortune 500 customers.
Right.
Where we're already there giving end-to-end automation solution for the most expensive processes that they have. So we have customers where the worth of that process is hundreds of millions of dollars that they're paying for people to navigate over the unstructured data. And now one by one we are adding all these use cases on our platform, and our engine called Hercules, which is a set of foundational blocks, and we are just assembling end-to-end application with having all these blocks.
So it's kind of like a platform that can be customized for that customer's needs, or?
So when we are understanding the problem, we are just reusing our building blocks to create this end-to-end solution. And this generative AI just added fuel to our rocket ship, that we started to be able to ship the end-to-end solutions even faster.
Right. Tell us what some of those building blocks are.
So we have the high level building blocks is about working with the unstructured data, for example, entity extraction, right, or summarization, or normalization of the structured data. We are using a lot of building blocks which are traditional now for generative AI. Summarization, test to SQL, and so on, And also we have a lot of guardrails. Because for us, the quality is the most important thing, and we are building a dependable AI, right? So you can rely on the results of the AI, and that's always most important thing for us, to gain the trust of the user. The user will collaborate with AI and trust important stuff and delegate important stuff to the AI.
So things like summarization, question answering on large amounts of text, extraction, etc. When you say you guys care most about the quality, so you have some large model that is doing those tasks, and then you have something built in that checks for the quality of how well that task was done, essentially?
So actually, it's much more, right? We are starting from understanding the business, right? Because all these large language models have huge amount of pre-trained data, right? But they are very generic. So when we are speaking about enterprise contexts, they start to hallucinate a lot, right? And you need to navigate over this last mile of making the systems ready for the enterprise. And we do a lot of job on understanding the ontology, then on the mapping, and it's done everything automatically. Create a classifier, so there is an ontology, and then all that creates a context for large language models. And we have a lot of separate models which are like really great and understand which is the best context that you can use for that particular prompt. So that engine we call systematic data labeling engine. We got Gartner Cool Vendor a year ago because of that, and Gartner analyst said, this is very visionary thing, because data-centric AI is the future, and these guys created absolutely automatic like system which is like labeling the data, and that is our like really competitive advantage, because we are saying generative AI is cool, but you need to understand the domain, right?
Right,
and the domain comes from ontology, and that's what our like engine does.
Yeah, and understanding the context of what the model should be doing. Right. That's really interesting. That means, I guess, when the discovery process for onboarding a customer requires understanding their business much more, and then you guys have models that you fine-tune with data that is specific to them or their domain, I guess, is what you're saying?
And we have, so there are two scenarios, right? So we have the library of the ontology and the classifiers for many industries. And
Sorry, just explain for those who might not know, what do you mean when you say ontology?
So these are like the top concepts of their business, right? It's the entities, interconnection of the entities, and that give you the domain knowledge, right? And we have, for many industries, we have the libraries. And when the new customer comes from that particular industry and domain, we are already reusing things that we have. And for the new ones, yes, we are working with them to like map this ontology, create classifiers.
So if you've worked with a number of law firms, so you have like a library for the legal domain, and you can use that for when a new law firm becomes your client, you're saying?
And not law firm. Right now, we are working already for large enterprises. We are targeting Fortune 1000.
Right. What are some of the other big categories other than legal?
One is, for example, wealth management, insurance. We are starting to work with banking. So all of them have like very similar problems, which we are solving with our like few products that we have. So one is like end-to-end extraction and end-to-end automation on unstructured data. So one is normalization of the structured data. And it's completely arbitrary, right? You have like, giving two types of the documents, like the template and input, and it understands how it can like modify and process the input document based on the template. We have a product like as a verify, which is compliance enforcement. So let's assume you have some rules and you have a data, and we understand where is the gap with that rules, and then we show to the gap, and also we're suggesting the fix to the problem.
Compliance enforcement, I imagine, is a huge one, because it's super important for the companies to not get into some legal trap if they're without missing on the compliance. As someone serving enterprises, so there's a ton of products out there now in the quote unquote generative AI space that rely on other model providers, right, to do the services. Since you guys are working with enterprise, and but the quality of the data as well as issues around like security and privacy are much, much more heightened for you guys. What does that mean for you guys when you go to pick a model? Are you guys building models yourself? Are you working with open source ones? Can you go to companies like OpenAI and use their models, or just, how does that work for enterprise?
So that depends on the use case, right? Because the rule of thumb is the following: don't send anything to the same OpenAI, which is like very sensitive.
Right.
And for the rest, why not, right? If you are working on code generation tasks, why not to use OpenAI, right? We have started from training our own models when we started to fine-tune the open source models based on some domains and tasks. And also we are leveraging the open models, like commercial models like OpenAI, etc., for some particular task as well.
Like, for example, data generation or something like that?
For example, code generation. We have like, so we are leveraging code and some advanced reasoning.
So you're saying you guys integrate multiple models into your stack for...
Yeah, we are multi-model approach.
Right.
And we are using this assemble approach that you are just like, building your solution from several models. And we are taking into account the constraints that are coming from our customers, right? The constraints, first you are mentioned absolutely correctly, the privacy, security, and so on. The second is their infrastructure, the cost of the models, right?
Right.
So we have a solution which is working on the CPUs. And this is like absolutely like, cool. So when I'm telling to guys from our community that we do instruction tuning on the CPUs, it's like, guys, you are crazy. And we are about to so we're working with one of the largest enterprises in the world on a case study for this like CPU-based inferencing.
Yeah.
So it was cool, like, a result that our team achieved.
You said something that sparked a question for me. So you mentioned earlier that you guys have all these specific domains that need their own data, like the models need to be adapted so that they work well for these domains. One of the biggest breakthroughs over the last like 18 to 24 months in language modeling, which really led to a lot of this stuff that we've been seeing over the last year, is instruction tuning. So do you guys do that for these specific domains? Do you go out to like, I don't know, lawyers or the other domains that you work in, banking and stuff, and get that kind of instruction data to apply to the model so that they work better for those domains, or is it different for you guys?
So you are absolutely right. So that's the most important part, right? Because with this instruction tuning, you have some kind of like, transfer of the knowledge from the like knowledge worker to AI. And we have our like technology, which is like a pretty solid technology, which is obtaining this instruction during the usage of our product.
So you guys capture it.
Yeah, and then we're storing in our verification databases and then using that for the fine tuning.
Right. Interesting. One of the things that's been spoken a lot about with the advent of generative AI has been this idea of like how companies can build a moat around some service, because increasingly, like when you guys started Zero in 2014, what you were doing was extremely difficult, and it's still difficult because of the use cases and everything that you mentioned. But a lot of these tasks are becoming easier and easier to do, like summarization, and I think it's just an API call, right? For you guys, it seems like you already had the benefit of being in the industry for many years, and you had the trust of large portions of the industry. And then you guys really benefit from all these advances in the tech side because you're able to adapt those for your existing solutions, right? How do you think about the idea of moat, and even just for you guys? Like, because as access to this technology gets easier and easier, presumably the competition and the solutions on the market also increase a lot. So how do you stay competitive?
It's a great question. So all these large language models are working out of box in many tasks, right? In many downstream tasks for like 70%, 80% of accuracy, right? And when we are speaking about the largest enterprises, that's not enough. You cannot rely on the system which is like right on 70%, right? You need to pass the last mile. And that's the defensibility, and that's the mode how you are creating a system which is dependable, which is reliable, which is giving 90+% of the accuracy. And there is the thing with our systematic data labeling engine, understanding of the domain, everything done inside their security perimeter. It is like the system which is learning over the time and adapts to that particular flows which are in the enterprise and giving them outstanding quality.
Right.
And that's the mode, and that's the network effects, because more you have, more usage you have, better these verification data sets are created.
The more data
and better fine-tuning you create, better system you have, better system leads to more usage, more usage to more feedback, and that's the defensibility flywheel.
Right. So it comes down to access to data that your competitors may not necessarily have.
Yeah. Data, and not only data, it's a
quality.
It's a data. It's from data you are giving a product solution. They are using that. Then you are receiving the feedback.
Right.
And that it's a derivative, right? And that's the goal, right?
Yeah. So for a company that's been on the market for 9 years, it's easier to have those pipelines where you're getting that data. If you were to give advice to an entrepreneur starting out today and who's interested in building in the AI space, and today you basically can't do anything in the AI space without using that level of tech, right? The level of tech that's available through
you can
large
always
model
find
providers and stuff. But I just mean how does someone starting out build that data moat? What advice would you give?
As high level, I can say that now it's a unique opportunity for many technological companies to enter the spaces very conservative, such as, for example, enterprise, right? Big enterprise. I can bring an example of Harvey, right? It's a very popular company which doing contract drafting. It's the company backed by OpenAI, which is 1-2 years old company, right? And that company, for example, wins customers such as Allen & Overy, largest law firm in the UK. There
Right.
are, and before that, is like nobody could imagine that a startup can win these kind of enterprises, right? So you just not need to find the problem. You need to find an expensive problem. You need to find the problem that enterprises even were afraid to think about that they can automate.
Right. I guess in that sense, not
and
much
go
has changed.
after them.
Right. Good answer. So a couple months ago, I noticed this really interesting phrasing on your website. I believe it was Copilot for knowledge workers. It sparked an interest for me in the sense that, for those who don't know, Copilot is a really popular product that was released by GitHub. It's a coding assistant tool, essentially. It helps you write code using AI. And the idea is that, based on the messaging that I got, was Copilot for knowledge workers would be like a more generalized thing for knowledge workers. So just looking ahead a little bit, how do you foresee the future of these Copilots for much more generalized stuff? Like coding is a very specific thing. So building a really specific Copilot for that is easy to imagine. And today there's already some on the market. For something more general, which maybe is even something that you guys are building up to, how do you see that changing our workflows in the next, let's say, 5 years, 10 years?
The very short answer, imagine Copilot of car, like Tesla of Copilot, so how it will change the way how you are driving. So the same you can apply or every single processes that you will have. So now we are creating these small Copilots, which are very similar with like Copilot like the car, right? And I was always giving this example. So large language models are great, ChatGPT, etc., but instruct them to drive a car.
Right.
Where you go, you will hit the tree,
Right.
just like 2 meters away, right?
Yeah.
So you need to pass like these millions of miles and train that. The same as the processes with the knowledge workers too, right? Because they were trained to do that. They learned and trained, and this is like their competitive advantage to do that the best in the world. So basically these copilots and what we are calling it skills, right? Skills and agents will become world-class experts in particular domain. And more usage we'll have, better they will become. And the people will be much more confident on delegating the task to them.
So there'll be like an accounting copilot, there'll be an insurance copilot, et cetera, et cetera.
Different domains, right? The things where you are putting your expertise.
Right. And it'll augment those workers, you think?
Augment, yeah, absolutely. Augment, so you can save time and use that for another stuff, right?
And make work more productive.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about your guys' presence in Armenia. So the structure of the company is split between the Bay Area and Armenia, is that right?
Our company is headquartered in Bay Area. Our largest office is here in Armenia. We have presence in Canada. We have presence in East Coast. We have presence in Europe, in Ukraine.
Where in Canada?
Montreal.
Montreal, okay. I'm from Toronto, that's what I was asking. Yeah. And our traditional last question is, where do you see your company in 5 to 10 years?
We see that we will have the largest workforce in the world, which will augment the knowledge workers in their day-to-day tasks.
By workforce, you mean like the people using Zero?
No, it's like the agents, like the copilots, which will augment millions, why not like even billion knowledge workers around the world to be much more effective on their tasks.
I'm waiting for that day. Thank you so much for joining us, guys.
Thank you for the invitation.
Appreciate
it was a great conversation.
Thanks.